Hello ladies and gentlemen, Nick here, and welcome to my review of Doctor Who Season 15, Story 5, Underworld. Now, before we get started, let's take a look at the other Bob Baker and Dave Martin stories that we have, that they've written for the show prior to this story. They wrote 8 in total, plus Bob Baker also wrote another one afterwards, but the 8th one is going to be next season, and Bob Baker's solo one will be the season afterwards. So we'll just take a look at the first 6. Okay, the first one was The Claws of Axos, which I thought was good, but I didn't found it brilliant. Again, it's a story that is quite divided between fans. They'll either like it or they won't. The second story was that was season 8. The second story was The Mutants, which I thought wasn't that great, but wasn't terrible. That was my least favourite of season 9. Season 8 with Claws of Axos, that was my second least favourite of season 8, but it was miles better than my least favourite of that season, Colony in Space. The third story was The Three Doctors, which was brilliant and really enjoyable. Got a bit of criticism, but personally I think it's an underrated gem. Favourite story of season 10, and season 10 was a great season, so yeah, they did something really well. The next story was The Sontaran Experiment, which I can't remember was either my second least favourite story of season 12 or in the middle of the ranking. It was one or the other. I might edit something to say which one it is, but it was that season was again really great, and again miles better from the weakest story of that season, Revenge of the Cybermen. Sontaran Experiment was a nice 2-part adventure, brought back 2-parters for the first time in 10 years, and like the Cybermen wouldn't be seen again until season 19. And it was a nice short adventure, quite fun, and a great reappearance of the Sontarans. How many is that? That's 4 stories. Their 5th story was The Hand of Fear, Sarah Jane's final story. Again, a bit underrated, but I can see why some people wouldn't classify it as a classic, but it's still a great story, and that whilst they didn't write the final scene, they certainly wrote a great story for it to feature in at the end. That story came 4th out of 6 on my season 14 ranking. Finally, The Invisible Enemy, which was earlier this season and was really fun and really entertaining. At time of recording, it's my current second favourite of the season after Horror Fang Rock. I think Horror Fang Rock is just a little bit better with the story, but I enjoyed Invisible Enemy quite a lot. I have found it to be absolutely brilliant. The complete opposite can be said for this absolute pile of shit. Oh god. What's worse is that it was played with strikes, I believe it was. Yeah, a budgetary crisis, not a strike action, but budgetary crisis. They decided to use color separation overlay technique to reduce expensive set and location work, and it just looks really, really poor. Yeah, it just looks really bad. Apparently, location work was more expensive. I would have thought that would be easier to do. Maybe I'm wrong. I was going to suggest they should have done a story like Spearhead from Space instead, where it would have been more location work, but I don't know. But just this story just, well, let's get the elephant out of the room. The blue screen effects just don't look very good. They just, I mean, it's 1978, but the fact that they set most of the story on blue screen, mostly in the caves, I mean, I'm sure the caves would have been the easiest sets to build. You could have done the Doctor's wife and just film down 1 or 2 pieces of a couple of cave sets, and just try and use some great camera work and editing to try and do that, and have the script written right around that, like Neil Gaiman did with Doctor's Wife. He probably expected he wouldn't have much corridor to play around with, so he wrote a way in for it to play out on screen where it appeared to be more than just one corridor. So that was Underworld. They should have done something here, but nope, they had to use a really poor blue screen effect and green screen effects. And another problem with the green screen is in part 1, the first time we see the windows of the spaceship, we're flying in the spaceship. First time we see them, it's a green screen. We see the green screen. They haven't put something over the green screen, so they're actually looking just at green. And then the next shot sees them in space, looking at the spiral. Don't tell me nobody noticed that in the editing. Someone must have noticed it, even if it was too late. Someone must have noticed that. That's bad editing. And on top of that, we got a really boring story. I mean, they've got some weak production values, but you could still have some great direction and a great story to try its best to make the most of the situation. But this story is absolutely boring. It's dull. It's tedious. The villains are shit. The guard people, they're just basically Darth Vader impersonators, except they don't sound intimidating. The costumes look a bit like a mix of Darth Vader from Star Wars and that gorilla costume James Bond wore in Octopussy when he was hiding from some of the villains on the train. It looks awkward, and they speak with normal voices, which do not sound intimidating. In fact, it actually sounds annoying, especially in this really young guard's case when he gets quite a lot of lines. They don't sound intimidating, they sound annoying. At least you could have done some sort of voice modulator inside the helmet to just, say that they did, and just have a voiceover with another voice on it in the story, just to make them sound more threatening. And then once they've taken the helmets off, then they can sound normal. And when they have taken the helmets off, they're even less threatening. They're just people. They're not threatening, and they're not even that good. I mean, the guys with the metal head ones, these Guardian people who work for the Oracle, they look a little bit better. But the ones that don't wear those gold helmets, the ones who are just running around in the caves, they're boring. They're dull, and they're not good villains. And once again, we've got another high power oppressing innocent people. Doctor and company have to start a revolution to overthrow them. We just had the Sunmakers. That was basically the same thing for different reasons. We're doing this again, second time in a row. Good God! And Sunmakers did it better. And as I said in that story, it's been done before and done better. And considering this is worse than the Sunmakers' version, God! I mean, I might have been too harsh on the Sunmakers on that bit then. Considering, as I said, there are other stories that have done this story better. And I would say the Sunmakers is better at doing it than this story. At least that was the whole point of that story. This time they just decide, oh, okay, revolution. We should overthrow these people. Second time in a row. I wouldn't mind if there was a story in between, but second time? And it only comes in halfway through? The Oracle is also not that great of an. It's just a female voice. It's apparently a computer. Another computer got above themselves. And they're just nothing. They're just a nothing villain. There's hardly any threats. The closest thing is when the side character's father is about to be killed, and the Doctor and Leela save him. That's the closest to them being threatening. Oh, and them also torturing one of the other, the ship they came with, torturing one of the crews for a bit. But then they soon realise that he's telling the truth. But again, besides that, they're not threatening. They actually, in fact, in that bit, they come off a bit more annoying and more dickish, which is pretty much how they are in this story, especially that really young guy. They're They're not threatening. They're bad villains. Really, really bad. And the side characters aren't that interesting. You got this one guy who helps the Doctor and Leela out, but he doesn't really do that much. And there's about a shot or two of him. There's a shot of him running to the right of a cave. I'm sure that shot's used at least twice in the story, maybe even 3 times. And he's not that interesting. The characters on the ship that we meet in the first episode, actually, episode 1 was actually okay just with those guys. It actually, it was on the same lines as Image of the Fendal and Sunmakers. It was not that great, but it was okay. But it's nowhere near as good as Invisible Enemies Part 1. But it was okay. And then, once we got onto the planet in Part 2, that's where the story went really, really downhill. And everybody's, the people on the ship, they started off a bit dickish, but they got better as the story went on. That's how you turn dicks into likeable characters. I'll say that. They start off dickish, but they get better as well. Unlike Sunmakers, where it just didn't quite work, because that one just like, oh, okay, change of personality as opposed to gradually improving. So I'll say this. So that is better than Sunmakers on that case. In that case, but yeah. But that being said, they're not the best characters around. They're okay, but they're not the best side characters. I mean, there is this really aggressive guy who's actually quite fun to watch in later scenes. He's annoying earlier on, but he gets better later on. Tom Baker, Louise Jameson, and John Leeson do great performances as our main leads. I think they're good here. Maybe not quite as good as Sunmakers, but still better than Image of the Fendal. They still do good job, but that's about it for positives. Along with that set on the spaceship, that actually is quite nice. Some nice actual sets. And also the villains, they are very pushy and shovey and shouty. Those are the types I absolutely despise. I absolutely hate those types. And worse, they do it for no reason. There's one bit where the young soldier they've got the Doctor, Leader, and the other guy cornered, and they're advancing on them, and they shout, "Move!" Well, it's like he wanted them to move, and they were sort of moving backwards, but he hadn't given them a clear instruction, and he was getting impatient with them. Well, why didn't you just tell them that you want them to move before shouting it at them? You know? Like a logical person say, oh, we're taking you back to base. Move! Something like that. But no, he just shouts it for no reason. Well, he does have a reason, but it's not very well done. What a prick. And also when they do get to that bit, when they're going round to be seen by the Oracle, they're getting the guards are kind of like, so they're sort of moving them like you would move some sort of object going down on a conveyor belt, like that. Okay, like this. I don't know if you were able to catch that on the camera, but taking stuff around and moving it along, basically. They didn't need to do that. They were walking to that spot pretty well as they were. They didn't need to do that. They didn't need to move them along like they were parcels on a kablam warehouse conveyor belt. Where's Ryan Sinclair when you need him? So, in conclusion, Underworld is bad. Very, very bad. I mean, yeah, you could try and forgive it for its for its execution with the blue screen effects if the story was good or if it was executed good. But no, the story is bad and the execution is bad as well. And it doesn't try to make the best of a bad situation. It just makes the bad situation even worse. As I mentioned, there's a few good points. Tom Baker, not Elizabeth Sladen, keep doing that. Louise Jameson and John Leeson, great. Those characters from the first ship, they improve over time, although one of them does go a bit dickish at the end, but only for a bit. K9 gets more use, a little bit, gets quite good use in it. Some nice sets when they actually use sets. And those gold helmet things are a decent design. But besides that, it's absolutely boring and poorly executed. And that's not even discussing the blue screen of the blue screen backgrounds, the color overlay color overlay thingy. It's just bad. It's a bad story. And whilst I hate Planet of Evil more subjectively, I think objectively, Underworld is the worst Tom Baker story so far. So, yeah, it's therefore making it my current second least favourite Tom Baker story. But objectively, objectively, it's the worst. So, Planet of Evil fans rejoice. It's not the worst objectively, just personally, I just can't stand it. Underworld, on the other hand, I think we can all agree is bad. So, yeah, even if you enjoy it, like I did with Sunmakers, it's bad. Just very, very bad. It's a difficult one to like. I mean, if you do like it, all praise to you. Thankfully, you were able to find something of value in this story. But as for me, second worst Tom Baker story subjectively, worst objectively. Expect this to be placed last on the season 15 ranking, which is far cry from Invisible Enemy or The Three Doctors. Heck, even the second to last place stories Bob Baker and Dave Martin wrote. Even the second to last place stories they wrote. Heck, even The Mutants, which was my least favorite of season 9, that wasn't as bad as this. It was twice as good, which means I'm going to give Underworld a 3 out of 10. Yeah, I was originally going to give it a 4, but thinking about it later on, it went down in opinion. It's awful. Basically, it's awful. That's that piece of shit out the way with. We can move on to much better things. You know, Graham Williams' era has been going a bit downhill recently. I mean, after Invisible Enemy, it's been going downhill. God, I wish they'd kept Philip Hinchcliffe. Apparently, because of Mary Whitehouse's complaint with The Deadly Assassin Part 3's cliffhanger, the BBC sided with her and fired Hinchcliffe, and they brought on Graham Williams, and he was made to make the series lighter and more comedic. Something that will certainly happen a little bit later on, but certainly we are seeing signs of that. But since Invisible Enemy, the era as well as the season has been going downhill. I mean, yeah, we've got 3 seasons of Graham Williams, but at this current time, it's going downhill more than some people think the Chris Chibnall era is going down at the moment. Seriously, Series 11 is way better than Season 15. Cross my heart, hope to die another day reference. Then again, that reference may be a reference some people might think is not a trustworthy one. Oh well. But Season 15 can be redeemed if the last story is good. And I like this last story, but I know it's not a very popular one, so we'll see how it goes down on the next rewatch. The next story is The Invasion of Time. Now, if I still like this one after rewatching this, then Season 15 might be saved. Even if it's a 6 or a 7 out of 10. But if it's 5 or lower, then we've got ourselves another dud in this season, and Season 15 will officially become the worst season of Doctor Who at this point. In fact, I think it already has become, but it can still be redeemed. If this story is 6 or higher, if it's 5 or lower, we're lost. We've lost. The viewers have lost. And I know this isn't a very popular story, so we'll see how it goes. But anyway, thank you for watching this review/rant on Underworld. Next time, hopefully better things with The Invasion of Time. See you guys next time. Goodbye.
Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the official Nicholas Payne Retro YouTube channel.
Here we go. It was a far much. But it was, and finally we come to, so we had some really great way to play it out. So we had a great way of it. I mean, weak production values is one thing, but maybe a great story could still. They just sound really annoying and really intimidating. No, they do not. No, that's wrong. That's how you write characters. That's how you write likable characters who start off as dick. And that's really about it. But I'm still not very good. But I. Well, you should have told them to do that in the first place. So it would get. They didn't need to move them along like a conveyor belt at a kabam. Fuck. They didn't need to move them along like a conveyor. They didn't need to move them like a. They didn't need to do that. They didn't need to move them like they were on a conveyor belt from Kabam's work. They didn't need to do that. They didn't need to move them on a kablam. Yeah, everything from Series 11. Yeah, Series 11 is getting a lot of flack, but this story, my goodness, is way. Hang on, I'll cut that. Okay. I think Underworld is the objectively worst. I think Underworld is the. Expect this to be the worst story. Or then again, that reference might get some people think not being able to